Thanks for tuning into another episode of Journal the Body podcast. Today I'm joined by my friend Josh. He's a registered dietitian, but he's got a very unique approach because he does have a passion for functional medicine and root cause, which is not something I see a lot of dietitians, carrying that particular philosophy. A lot of them are more so in line with government recommendations. So it's really refreshing when you have somebody like him in the space. He's worked with over 1,000 clients, everything from young professionals, young athletes to, clinical populations. So he's really seen it all. And he's got a particular interest in digestive health and autoimmune diseases, as well as metabolic disorders, which is great because it's definitely in line with a lot of like what we talk about here on the show. And he's got a really great big picture approach. And he's really able to help his clients in particular achieve like long-term results, which is, again, very refreshing. A lot of that root cause medicine comes into play there. So he's a firm believer in the power of food as medicine, which is something that, I really resonate with myself. And he's really, dedicated to educating people on like what a balanced diet is. So he's been able to make a really great impact in the space, and I'm super excited he's joining me today because he's also got quite a bit of knowledge when it comes to biohacking, and just some of the daily lifestyle habits that can really make a big impact. So we're gonna get into it today. Abby here, and I'm sitting down today with my friend Josh. It's been a good day so far. We were just catching up. He was doing donuts in the parking lot after a snowstorm with his wife earlier, and I was just getting the lowdown on what was going on. Yeah, Josh, what's up? How are you doing?
Yeah, good morning. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm excited to kind of dive into some biohacking and some health with you.
I know it's always a good time when we chat about all the things. The last time I saw you was in Utah. We did a little retreat, and we had a good time.
It was a good time. It was a good time. I got to see your personality because we got to spend a
I
little bit
know.
more time together versus when we initially met. I
The
think you were a little
first
stressed.
the first time I think I met Josh, I'm pretty sure he thought I was antisocial because I think it was like all in the same week of me finding out we were moving to New York, and I think I had just kind of gone into a not a I don't want to say like a depressive mode, but I was doing a lot of internalizing things in that moment, and so I was so quiet when I met them, and yeah,
You were just stressed. It's all good.
and then I went on this trip with you, and he was like, she won't shut up.
No, I appreciate the energy.
It's so fun. Yeah, we had a good time. That was a good time. We're all like kind of in a little practitioner circle. What do you call it? Like practitioner circle with some of the essential
Yeah,
oil friends.
just a
Good
team
time.
of other practitioners that are interested in functional medicine.
There you go. We love it. Well, okay, Josh. So you're a dietitian, and I have my reservations about the traditional dietitian. And so you're one of the few people that I can like clap for and say, hey, like functional dietitian who got out of the matrix of what the government, you know, government deemed programs are in the college, like, I don't know, in the schooling system. So I've gotten into my fair share of arguments with dietitians who like to pull credentialism over me. But I gotta say, I gotta hand it to you. Like, you're one of the few that I'm like, yeah, I would listen to what he says, and I would probably take every piece of his advice and be like, you should implement this, especially if you're like a client. So give me your spiel, give me your story. What
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. And I know that dietitians can have a bad reputation in the even nutrition space, even in the healthcare space. I will say that dietitians don't get a lot of respect in the hospital world, the clinical world of dietetics. But for me, I went to one of the top rated naturopathic schools of medicine for my master's degree in nutrition,
Mm.
uh, Bastyr University. It was a great program, phenomenal program. I learned a lot, but I think really the actual functional piece, I did a lot more of my own self study on. Even that program at naturopathic school was still very mainstream in the education, very much following USDA guidelines.
Yeah.
Uh, so I got in multiple conversations with professors as far as like protein needs from a performance perspective versus what the RDA says. And so I went through that program. I learned a lot, did my internship in Houston for the requirements to become a dietitian, and spent time in food service management, spent time in a hospital, spent time in sports dietetics with the University of Houston, which is where I wanted to be. I wanted to be a sports dietitian and potentially work in college sports or even pro sports. And then just getting into that atmosphere and realizing that that wasn't going to be the lane that I wanted, especially having a family. It would be great if you're single, but having a family, just the time requirements and the autonomy just wasn't going to be super conducive. So I've always been super interested in supplements and kind of a more natural approach to health and wellness. My wife and I worked in a locally owned supplement store for 5 or 6 years, really diving into the basics of utilizing nutrition and supplementation to really help and manage health and disease. So I went off on kind of the functional approach on my own, really. Wasn't necessarily taught that in school. It wasn't the
Same.
normal curriculum. Even the concepts of like drainage and detox and biohacking, and even the more unconventional topics were not necessarily addressed in my program, but things that I've done just listening to podcasts, watching YouTubes, following other people on social, or even just connecting with other practitioners and seeing how they manage clients, seeing what things that they're addressing. Just because even like I know you talk about mold and heavy metals and things like that, and parasites, which aren't necessarily addressed in
Right.
Western medicine. So
It's not a like definitely not one of the facets that they talk about. Well, I didn't know that you actually went to a naturopathic school, which is really interesting. And yeah, that like sparked curiosity for me of like the differences even in the naturopathic program versus what I know some of the dietitians in my school like went through in terms of just yeah, some of the fundamentals of nutrition. And I'm actually like very curious. Now I'm going to go do some do some digging on what that program looks like. But it's similar to you. I was like I got my bachelor's in kinesiology and then ended up down an absolute rabbit hole as I was in the middle of a move to California. And then, you kind of get like sometimes when you're dealing with chronic health issues, you kind of get into this like desperate mode of I need to figure it out myself because I don't
yeah,
have all this money to shovel out. And yeah, you end up down a rabbit hole. So
yeah. And for me, even going down that rabbit hole, I think what was the catalyst that put me down that rabbit hole? May of 2020, I was out with some friends in the woods and ended up getting bit by a tick. And then Tina went hard into tick research and curing Lyme disease and co-infections of Lyme. Ended up on 3 weeks of doxycycline, uh,
oh
which just
tough.
destroyed my gut. And I believe that sparked a pretty severe gluten allergy. And so basically because of the tick, because of the antibiotics, then going down a much deeper road of functional medicine and a more natural approach to healing. But yeah, that was like what now, 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago
Wow.
that I've been like heavy in it. But like I said, I've been passionate about functional, more natural medicine for a long time, but it went deeper when I got bit by that tick.
Wow. Yeah, my ex actually similar story. We were in Australia, got bit by a tick, suffered crazy Bell's palsy, was
Oh,
like
wow.
paralyzed for 3.5 weeks on the right side of his face, or yeah, I think it was the right side. And I that was when I went down the rabbit hole of Lyme's disease and some of that other stuff as well. And I realized that contrary to like really popular belief, it can actually be transmitted partner to partner, not in like
Yeah.
you don't necessarily have to get a tick bite, right?
Right.
And I think that that's like a wildly debated, controversial stance of like, no, it can get transmitted human to human. And, then I went down that same rabbit hole of like the co-infections, Epstein-Barr virus, and like some of the other caveats within
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yep.
crazy. Oh my gosh. Okay. So now you're in Washington and you've kind of like pivoted completely into functional medicine, and I'm in like a different space a little bit more so because I'm like kind of on the it's like weird, I'm on the marketing side, but like just love to read a lot and like content. But you're on the practitioner and like diagnostician side of things. So you and I, the last time, I think we may have, I don't know if we like talked a little bit about this, but you said it was one of your favorite topics, which is detox versus drainage. And I kind of want to get into that because I have been seeing like a ton of things in the regards to like the lymphatic system. I feel like this past year has just gotten really popular. People are like, oh yeah,
Yeah,
you're like
yeah,
lymphatic system. Like, oh yeah, it's a thing. It's like, the white fluid. It's like this like white fluid that coats like the body and it kind of like runs in the same, patterns as like your cardiovascular system, if you're thinking
right.
about it. But it's a lot more kind of in depth than that. And I think like for the longest time, detox has gotten all the praise. And there's like this huge missing factor of, well, you probably shouldn't be detoxing if you're not draining properly. So
Right.
let's dive into that and give me your take, your spiel, and I might
Yeah.
add some thoughts.
Uh, I think detox, the word detox is obviously a big trigger word. And I think even in the last probably 20 to 30 years of health, a lot of people have tried to jump on the detox train, especially like detox teas or detox supplements or just like detox plans, do a 7-day detox, a 10-day detox. And then you also have people like you don't ever need to detox because you have a liver and you have like kidneys that filter out,
Which
which
I
I
think is
get.
a hilarious argument when people are like, "Oh, you don't need a detox. You have that's what your kid like your kidney and your liver."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So from a practical perspective, obviously that detox and drainage conversation is something that is so important because we're constantly detoxing. Your liver is constantly detoxing. Your kidneys are constantly filtering and cleaning out the blood. But what happens downstream to that, if there's any sort of stagnation, you talked about the lymph, if there's any sort of like backup or buildup, then obviously your detoxification organs are not going to be functioning as well as they can. And you think about causes of in like added detox or added toxic load to your body, environmental toxins, whether it's fragrances, aerosols, things like that. But even looking into the food where I spend my time, the quality of the food that we're seeing, especially in America, is just not conducive for an anti-inflammatory, a health promoting lifestyle. That's the standard American diet that is I'm referencing. But yeah, we're getting all of these really unhealthy oils. We're getting even things like glyphosate and herbicides that are just sprayed all over produce, which many other countries are not utilizing these practices. And so we're seeing a lot of health disparities in the United States in particular because of the environmental exposures and the load and not being able to fully flush these out.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And you can hear my dog growling in the background because she's like on high alert every time she hears somebody go by the apartment. That's actually really fascinating. And one of the things that I was thinking about was how like going back to what we said, like there's a lot of the practitioners that are like classic, or I should say like conventionally trained, right? They're like, well, you don't need X, Y, or Z because this is what your like kidney and your liver is theoretically, yes, it's supposed to do these processes and these functions. But I read this really great book called, have you come across like Andreas Moritz's books at all? He's got this awesome book called The Amazing Liver and Gallbladder Flush. And it basically takes you like step by step on different diseases and the metastasis of these diseases and essentially how they can be effectively linked to the liver. And, he basically calls out all of these conventional practitioners and is like, you're like basing your premises on the fact that in a perfect world, like none of these endocrine disruptors, the fragrances, the phthalates, the food, the this, the that would like, we're not in a place where it essentially like affects the liver enough so, but there's all this like non-calcified gall sludge essentially sitting in the liver that's not necessarily like being picked up on ultrasound. So you have these people walking around with like livers that are essentially functioning at 50% capacity, and you wouldn't necessarily be able to know or tell that on an ultrasound, or unless it got really bad in terms of like you're seeing your calcifications for gallstones, etc.
And so it's like this undetected, like, you know, this majorly undetected problem. And I just thought, like, his book, like, if you ever want to read it, it is so interesting. But again, it goes back to the drainage. And for me, like, the drainage has been the biggest issue, especially after getting my wisdom teeth taken out when I was like a younger kid, when I was like, how old was I? 17. After I got my wisdom teeth taken out, my lymph nodes ever since then, like, I've gone through phases where they're just like so swollen,
Yeah.
like right behind my jaw. And I'm assuming, again, it can be from viral load, co-infections, etc. But the drainage is not like properly functioning. And I also like have like liver issues that have kind of coincided with that. That's really, it's really
Yeah,
interesting.
and that's a similar story to many people. I mean, even just thinking in terms of oral health and what that implies for your whole body health, especially with the lymph nodes and everything in the neck, and then obviously draining into the lymph nodes in your armpits, and especially for women around breast tissue. And so if you get these lymph nodes that are overly active or overly inflamed, all of the viral load or bacterial load or whatever it is that's just sitting in those lymphs are going to be in that surrounding tissue. But even another thing that's a little bit more nutrition focused, specific to the liver, is the aspect that there is a significant increase in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease linked to high fructose corn syrup. So another thing that specifically in the United States, where our food supply is not supporting our body's natural processes the way that we are intended to function. And so if you have any sort of perversion of what is natural, there's going to be things that aren't going to work as efficiently as they should. And then you just get a buildup way upstream from the liver.
Right. And but they're not doing these studies or going in depth, especially with these younger individuals in their 20s and 30s, right? Like finding some of these, you know, basically they're not going in depth and finding this stuff early on. Like it's this, like, again, it's this kind of like buildup. But and that's why I love traditional Chinese medicine. And like kind of like what Dr. Motley's doing, for example, is it's addressing, I don't know, it just helps like a lot of people, especially when they're younger, address like major issues. Like birth control is such a huge one with the liver in particular. It's just, I don't know, it allows you to kind of understand like the pathophysiology, like how it works, like upstream and downstream a little bit more than like the Western. It really tends to like isolate the one symptom, and then it tries to categorize the one symptom, and nothing else is linked. And part of the reason why I was reading about this in The Web That Has No Weaver the other day, like one of the main reasons they do that is because you can't, as like a practitioner, you can't bill like a certain treatment for one part of the body that may actually have to do with the other part of the body. And this all has to, like, it comes down to insurance, which is insane to me. So like you're looking at this like Western approach that's essentially like completely foregoing the upstream and the downstream effects, and it's like isolating this like one symptom, and it's foregoing like so many other potential like roots and facets purely for the like insurance side of things.
Yeah.
Because it won't, like, you can't link lymph and like your oral health to something that actually has to do with the liver, because it won't be billed properly. So I just like, I was reading that the other day and it made me think of that, and I was like, that is so fascinating. Now, in terms of like drainage, when we talk about drainage, there's like some really important facets of making sure you're like draining properly, and it starts with the colon, and then you can kind of get into the liver and some of the other stuff. Do you have a particular like protocol you're like, this is like something that I personally like would subscribe to if I'm looking to like really open up my drainage pathways in response to like,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely. And I think one of the most critical things to drainage is getting people pooping every single day, which it's amazing how little people have regular bowel movements.
It blows my mind. And I learned about this during pregnancy because everything changes during pregnancy. But I could not believe, like, some people would tell me, they're like, I haven't pooped in 2 weeks. I'm like, what do you mean you haven't
Yeah,
pooped in 2 weeks?
that's crazy. It's crazy. But that's usually the area that I start first. And from a food first approach, trying to figure out, okay, where in your diet are you either lacking good quality nutrition, whether it's fruits and vegetables, so give you adequate fiber? Are you getting adequate hydration? And then from there, going into, okay, we may need to do like gut massages, or like starting with like a magnesium supplement to kind of help move things through. If that doesn't work, taking a step further, maybe introducing something like a coffee enema. But that's kind of my starting point, is getting people to where they're having regular bowel movements. If they're not a daily, try to get them to daily. If they're not even multiple times a week, like just try to increase the frequency of those bowel movements, so that when we actually start addressing more of the detoxification, we've already opened up that drainage pathway of getting people to have those regular bowel movements.
Amen. I'll say it for the people in the back. If you're trying to detox and you're not pooping every day, you're setting yourself up for absolute catastrophe. Like absolute catastrophe, because there's so many like things that can go wrong if you're not draining appropriately. Okay, so you start with the colon essentially, and then like we're working our way backwards. So once we've like opened up the colon, then we get into I'm assuming you do the liver next. Well, also coffee enemas tend to like really flush the liver and then like make that massive like production of glutathione. So I'm curious.
Yeah, and I initially thought that getting buy-in from clients on coffee enemas was going to be a lot harder than it has been. I think that's also something that's become a lot more readily used or even mainstream. And I think it's even going back to what you said. People are just desperate. They're like, I'm not pooping. Like, if this is going to make me poop, if this is going to reduce the bloating in my bowels, then like I'll try anything. So I've had pretty good success with those, and just helping people just stimulate the bowels again and kind of get those moving. Addressing the liver, I like supporting the liver, whether it's from supplementation or even like cruciferous vegetables, getting some extra DIM in there, especially for women to detox a little bit extra estrogen. But things like TEDCA, just to really support the liver in conjunction with obviously removing as much of the environmental toxins as you can. So you're not just continually flowing them in as you're trying to flush them out. Right. Flush them out, but also kind of stop upstream that influx, changing to better quality food, reducing like fast food, junk food that's just going to sit in your stomach, but try to get you on better foods so that things are actually flowing freely again out through the colon.
You're using CellCore, I'm assuming, for like these.
Yeah. I like CellCore. I've used it personally and have had seen really good results with it. I've used it with clients that either had really poor energy. My father-in-law also got bit by a tick this year as we were elk hunting, and even just putting him through a parasite cleanse during a full moon. He's got not quite arthritis, but heading that way in his hands, and even just using the CellCore protocol for the parasite cleanse, his hands, the improvement in the inflammation was significant. So I have a lot of really cool testimonies from CellCore. I like the products. I like the kind of the mission behind the company as well. So
yeah, no, I personally, so it's like actually funny. I was about to start like a CellCore protocol, and then I found out I was pregnant. And if like, for those of you, like, you're not really supposed to be actively trying to detox and drain frequently during pregnancy. It's kind of a place where you kind of need to be more stagnant with a lot of that stuff and just like focus on like really nutrient dense, really fueling yourself. So I was like literally about to order like all this stuff, and then I found out, and I was like, well, that's a bummer, because now I can't do it. I mean, obviously it was like so awesome, but at the same time I was like, oh, that's such a like, that stinks, because now I'm gonna have to wait until like basically after I'm done breastfeeding to go through like one of these like more extensive endeavors for like, drainage and detox and stuff. So but
and obviously pregnancy and breastfeeding is a different beast. Like that's just one that just erring on the side of caution. Yeah, you don't want to be trying to actively detox or drain excessively. Right. Above like your normal, like obviously healthy diet, removing environmental toxins. There's still going to be a natural detoxification process that you can do on a more mild approach. But yeah, pregnancy, breastfeeding are just a completely different beast.
You just like don't want to touch. You're like, now is not the time to introduce anything new. My really good friend, Dr. Rebecca, she and I were joking. We were like, pregnancy is like the one time like you stick to like what you know, and like what works really great, and there is no, like, you do not want to try to like introduce anything new. And like even some of the stuff you have to take out, like I can't actively sit in the sauna for like extended periods of time, because again, you just don't want like to heat the fetus because of the neurological side of things. So it's like it's been a whole new world of learning. But yeah, you're kind of like overly cautious to where you're like, whoo, you're like treading on thin ice. But yeah, no, once I'm done and once I'm ready, I may give you guys a call and be like, okay, I'm gonna do a full-fledged protocol to, reset.
Absolutely be happy to help. And Tina, obviously, I didn't say this earlier, but my wife is a nurse practitioner, and so she is quite a bit more Western trained, but still has that functional approach. So understanding both from the allopathic medicine and even the functional side, the aspect of promoting health and just really look at detox and drainage. So she is a great resource for sure.
I know, between the two of you guys, I'm like, you guys are a powerhouse. Like, just we need more of you guys in the space. It's been awesome. Now we could go into biohacking products, because like I have my personal favorites, but I want to know what yours are at the moment. So give me the scoop. What's your regimen?
I think there's probably three that I love the most, and one is sauna.
Okay.
So introducing some sort of heat. The research on sauna for metabolic health, for cardiovascular health, is pretty remarkable. So sauna would be one, specifically an infrared sauna. That way you get that wavelength of light that penetrates deeper into the cells. Basically is gasoline for the mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell. Come on.
Powerhouse of the cell. Remember that in my 4th grade biology class. I'm bringing
Right, that's right.
That's the one thing I think everybody takes back from their science class. They're like, yeah, mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell. Here we go.
Yeah, you could say Golgi apparatus. They're like, I don't even know what that is. You could say the nucleus. They're like, I think that's the center. But as soon as you say powerhouse of the cell, they're like, mitochondria. I got it.
Dunkin' Donuts literally ran an ad the other week. I was actually crying. I might try to send you it after. And it was like an ad for their new matcha drink, and it goes, "Come on, babe, you barely touched your mitochondria." Like, it was a real life ad that they ran. So like, it was like, I will send it to you. It was hilarious, and I was like, this is so funny, because I think it's the only word in science that like everyone remembers.
Yeah, that's right. The powerhouse of the cell. That's so funny. Mitochondria.
Yeah. Mitochondria wasn't their best work, to be fair. It's memorable enough that I'm talking about it right now. So
at least Dunkin' Donuts is trying to promote some matcha.
Right? I was like, we'll take that spin. Now, a question. Okay, so your take on coffee, because you like to use King coffee, correct? And I'm a big fan of King coffee. As of more recently, I haven't like done the full-fledged, like ordered like a 60 pack yet, but every time I've tried it, used it, I love it. So I want to hear your take on coffee on a side note.
No, I am from Seattle, so if you don't enjoy coffee, you're probably not a true Seattleite. But obviously digging into kind of the more health aspects of coffee and the implications of that. For me, getting into King Coffee was a means to obviously have organically grown coffee. That was a big priority for me. And then having the additional benefits from the reishi spores, which there's a ton of amazing research on reishi and just all the benefits of that as far as blood sugar regulation, immune support, things like that. So adding that in was a big win for me. I transitioned from regular coffee to King coffee at a point of where I was like, I needed coffee to even like get my eyelids open. Like, I was having to have 2 or 3 cups of coffee a day just to like be functional. And so I really wanted to decrease my coffee intake and decrease my caffeine intake. And so I was like, you know what, I'm just going to transition into trying to go the more health route and try to get the cognitive benefits from the reishi as well. And so legit within the first week of switching from multiple cups of coffee a day to King coffee, I was able to just do one of the little packets each day and felt like I had sustained energy throughout the entire day. So, which was at that point, I was like, man, what is this and why is it giving me so much sustained energy?
I need to give some of that to Rodrigo. I'm like, homeboy is chugging like multiple cups a day. Now, we like actually recently did a detox for 2 months where we didn't touch coffee hardly at all. And that's probably mostly because his and I's anxiety levels around the time that the restaurant was opening and the pregnancy really out of hand. And we were like, let's like back off of this. But I actually ordered something that's like a similar product, which is like Four Sigmatic. I had known about them in LA because they ran in like some similar circles, like with another company called Mudwater. And so I had like been actively using it. And again, milligram dosage of caffeine was like different, but the mushrooms, I don't know what it was. I just like both Rodrigo and myself, like we felt great, but I would say King coffee even topped that for me.
Yeah.
And there's like actually this thing in TCM. My friend was telling me, she's like a doctor of TCM, she's an acupuncturist. She was like, yeah, there's actually something called a reishi baby, and if you supplement reishi during pregnancy, they like say that the baby turns out to be this like just really cool, calm, collected, like graceful like infant and child. And I was like, sign me up. I was like, give
Give
me
me a,
all the reishi.
that's,
So like sold on that front. I'm gonna
yeah.
need to place an order soon, because like you said, I was able to like be totally fine all day with like 1 cup of that coffee. And
Yeah.
like, what's the milligram dosage per packet for caffeine? Do you know?
Uh, I thought it was equivalent to like 100 to 125 milligrams, but Courtney said that it was like much lower.
Really? That's
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah,
Uh,
I was like actually curious about like what the milligram dosage was, because I felt phenomenal, and so did Rodrigo.
yeah.
Um, like with the few packets we did have, and I was like, this stuff is different. And
Yeah.
then you spend $4, actually probably more like $6 now in New York City on an Americano, and you're like, I can't justify this.
Yeah. It's same boat. It's like $12 for Tina and I to get 2 coffees, which is just it's not sustainable.
Nope.
But
It's inflation.
yeah, so obviously the things with coffee, there are people that are anti-coffee, there are people that are pro-coffee. I think the biggest things to see is obviously getting organically sourced coffee. That's a big one. And then getting coffee that it's batch tested for mold, just because the coffee can grow
Yeah.
mold. You obviously don't want to put the mold and releasing of mycotoxins into your system.
Oh,
Um,
toxin A, baby. We don't want that
uh,
one. That's a kidney.
ugh.
That's a kidney screw up right there. Yeah.
So I like King coffee. I also have been drinking Purity coffee. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with them?
Yeah.
Uh,
Actually, back in the day when I used to work for Clean Juice, we switched to Purity Coffee. We were working really closely with the founders.
that's
Um,
awesome.
so yeah, they're great company. Again, like all of the mold testing is really kind of the thing that I would say they hang their hat on, which is great.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's awesome. Now, back to the biohacking products.
Wow. Yeah.
What are your other 2 products? Like, I'm very curious.
So sauna was number one. If you don't have a sauna, even just utilizing like a red light, just red light. We have a Loom box, which is just a mini full spectrum infrared panel. A lot of good research on just light therapy in general, for healing, for mitochondrial health, boosting testosterone. Uh, there are some research to say that light therapy directly on the testicles can
Yep.
increase testosterone. So I'm certainly
Yep.
going to be a fan of that. And then cold exposure. I mean, even if it's just a cold shower or even digging into like actually ice plunging, the benefits. Dr. Huberman out of Stanford was talking about 11 minutes a week, which is pretty tangible for most people. I mean, that's if you're doing it 5 times a week, that's really only a little over 2 minutes. But the therapeutic benefits, increase in epinephrine, increase in norepinephrine, increase in dopamine. There is research looking at actually using cold therapy to manage depression, to manage anxiety, to manage PTSD. And I can speak to that from a personal perspective. Just doing a cold plunge, I'm going to do one today. I'm going to hop in the sauna, then I'm going to go in the cold plunge today in the snow. But just the rush that you get when you get out of the cold water, you just feel so good. You actually feel like a natural high, which is
Yeah.
awesome.
No, every
So
time I've done it, it's that same exact. I don't really have the same resources. Like when I build my massive compound with Rodrigo, like we're gonna have all of those amazing biohacking tools.
yeah,
2024, that's where we'll be. But like every time I've gotten out of that, like anytime I get out of a cold plunge, I'm like, there's just something, and I feel like I can't even mimic it in the cold shower. I'm like, it's just not
yeah,
quite the same.
yeah,
Like it's still great to do the cold showers, and that's like really all we have here in New York at the moment. Unless you want to pay like a $500 a month membership for some crazy biohacking place, which
no,
is
it's not
insane.
worth it.
But the thing that's actually I think really curbed Rodrigo and I's depressive, like seasonal. I had really bad seasonal affective disorder as a kid.
Yeah,
And so that's actually what sparked me to like move to places that were typically warmer. So the last few years I lived in California and Florida. And so here it's been really interesting to see like what my body was going to do. And the thing that I would swear that has like staved off my seasonal depressive disorder is the red light by a long shot, like by a lot. I don't know. Do you guys get that in Washington? You feel like you get like some of the seasonal?
Oh yeah. I think we're probably pretty close to the same latitude as you.
Yeah, right.
Which means daylight is not I mean, it's a hot commodity in the wintertime here in Seattle. Usually gets dark about 4:30.
It's terrible here too because I'm facing like basically like northeast. And all of the buildings basically like by 1 p.m. block all the light. So you're like all the skyscrapers, it just makes it 10 times worse. You're like, I'm never gonna see the light of day.
Yeah. And that is obviously doing red light. There's so many strategies you can do to implement that. But even for someone like you living in New York that doesn't necessarily have access to space for a sauna or space to do cold plunging, like it's such a small like unit that you can use for infrared that has such tremendous benefits. Even people that are awake before there's natural light, like getting the red light, that full spectrum light on you in your eyes, can be a really effective strategy. Yeah, even with that cold shower aspect too. Like I don't like doing cold showers. I would much rather get in a frozen tub than get in a cold shower. But there's obviously still a therapeutic benefit to even just finishing every shower with 30 seconds of cold or a minute of cold or 2 minutes of cold and having that contrast therapy. But there are different strategies that you could use even in like a small apartment. Like I like a Therasage for
I was gonna say we actually have the portable sauna sitting under our bed. Like that's one of the few things Rodrigo and I like literally invested in. Of course, I'm not doing it as much right now, because but we have the portable sauna like sitting under our bed in our studio, like studio apartment. It's like the only things we have in the apartment that we were like, we're gonna let this take up space was like a couple of the biohacking tools. We were like, we need to have this. Like
so there are a couple of things like, and even you can get crazy with the biohacking world. Like it just depends on how deep you want to dive into that. But I think just an at-home portable sauna is great, and then a little red light unit that you could use externally from the sauna, and then even cold shower. So that's two products that you could use.
RA optics are great too. I've got like 2 pairs of RA optics for like, especially walking at night in the city. You just get exposed to so much artificial light. Those have been great. Yeah, that's the only other like major biohacking tool. I've actually like, I've been really out of my normal regimen. So I'm excited.
I love that you say that about the optics too, because we use blue light blockers at night religiously every single night. We have the 99% blue blockers, so the orange lens, so we're just looking our best.
There you go.
But it actually makes a huge difference. I have fallen asleep multiple times with my blue light blocker glasses on because my eyes are so relaxed and not getting that constant blue light stimulation.
Totally. Rodrigo actually laughs because we joke like when he first met me, obviously it was like, oh, we just go to bed like normal. And now when I go to sleep, I've got the mouth tape over my mouth. So when he kisses me goodnight, there's literally like tape on my mouth. I'm usually wearing like a satin bonnet so that my hair doesn't get overly and then we've got the like AC running at like 65, 66 degrees. So it's cold. We like sit for the red light in front of the red light for at least 2 hours. It feels like before bed. And then we have blackout. He just like laughs. He's like, your bedtime is like an ordeal. And like, God bless him, because he grew up in like a fishing town in Peru. So he like grew up like just all of this stuff was like natural for him, like eating well, and like his jaw developed great. So like he doesn't do any like mouth breathing at night and stuff. And I'm like sitting over here with my tape like over my mouth and like all of my little biohacking tools. You just think it's hilarious.
Tina and I are looking our best. Mouth taped, nasal strip on the nose for better nasal breathing. She's got winkies on her forehead just to help for anti-aging. She's not doing Botox, and so she's got
her and me both.
The silk thing over her hair. So yeah, we are definitely
we're on the same route there. Yeah, absolutely. That's hilarious. I feel like that's like every like couple that's like into health at some point they just hit this like point where they're like they've got 5 different things on hand for sleeping. What was the mouth tape you were telling me about that you were like, if you're not using this mouth tape, like
it's called hostage tape. Let me text Tina and I'll have her bring me one and I'll put it on.
There you go. I was gonna say, is it look like you're an actual hostage when you're wearing it? Guys, like if you don't know, mouth breathing at night is one of the most detrimental things to your health, including your hormonal health, your oral health, your viral load. Like we could get into a whole thing on that alone. And Andrew Huberman's podcast recently that I listened to, he was like, the number one thing that we see disruptions of like estrogen and testosterone is like apnea. He was like, because you're literally taking cholesterol and you're converting it typically into cortisol instead of estrogen or testosterone. Like, again, if you were to really simplify the process, that process down. But he was like, one of the biggest cofactors for like really poor testosterone or estrogen levels is essentially apnea. It's like up there in the top, probably 2 to 3 like causation factors, or I don't know if it's, I would venture to guess it's causation, but yeah, fascinating. Absolutely fascinating stuff. Yeah, I was gonna say, ooh, Tina's got the hostage tape. Okay, let's see the hostage tape.
Okay, so they send you in these sweet little packets. They send a little metal tin too, so you can take it out of these packets and put it in a metal tin next to your bed. But it's black, and
Oh my gosh, that's huge. I've never tried one that big. You do look like a hostage. That's crazy. Mine are like very dainty, clear strips that just, they're like X-like strips that go over. I think Rodrigo, if you saw me in the middle of the night wearing that, you'd be like, whoa.
So I like these because they are stretchy.
Oh, that's cool.
And so you can still move your mouth. And even when you apply it to your lips, you still can breathe through it. But
is this what Tina's also been using on her forehead? Wow, look at that.
Yeah, so you can kind of talk.
That's incredible.
You can kind of talk, but that's, I mean, another biohacking thing. When I first started mouth taping, I was like, good grief, this is going to kill me because.
Right, because you're like practice.
I'm a mouth breather, or I have been a mouth breather just because I've had issues with my septum. So I actually had nasal surgery to kind of clear up the airway. And so I was like, I'm going to absolutely die if I try to mouth tape, which is why I also throw the nose strips on there too. But I've been sleeping well. I can check the data on my Oura Ring to see that I actually get a deeper sleep when I mouth tape.
Totally. So yeah, you get a much deeper sleep when you avoid mouth breathing at night, which was one of the other like really critical points there. So if you're actually like struggling with sleep. Now, I did also hear like obviously for a lot of people, they feel like they're not getting enough oxygen at first, especially people with apnea. Obviously, what you just said, it's kind of like I had a couple of nose issues post soccer in high school where I had a deviated septum pretty bad. But once you get like, even if you just start out with a couple hours at a time, it's kind of like it's a muscle that you almost practice and you get a lot better at it with time. So it's like, don't give up if you suck at nose breathing at first. Like you just have to practice night after night. And
have you heard of the book?
Oh, go for it.
Have you heard of the book, The Oxygen Advantage?
Yes. Who's it by though? I've heard that book.
Stand by, I'm pulling it
up. There's a book that I know about in regards to mouth breathing that is called Jaws, and it's all about oral development and all of the correlating facets of oral development, mouth breathing. I think it also probably dives into like postural development, because if you don't have a correct jaw, like if your jaw is not correctly developed in childhood, it affects like so many other things, like again, oral health. You're looking at spinal health, and it's kind of even crazy that it would affect all of these like other things, viral load, even how you digest food. And etc. So yeah, there's a lot there.
The Oxygen Advantage is by Patrick McKeown.
Okay. Yes, I have heard it. I haven't read it.
Principle that people are actually overbreathers. And so he kind of goes through a strategy of getting people to actually reduce their breathing. And he says most people focus too much on oxygen and not realizing that CO2 actually has a really important metabolic process in the body. And so keeping CO2 in you for longer, he was talking about if you could go like exhale normally and then count the amount of seconds it takes you to where you actually start to feel a physiological response of I need to breathe right now. He said a good timeline is 20 seconds. A great time is 40 seconds. Can you imagine exhaling and not breathing for 40 seconds?
That's no.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
but I'm sure that's one of the major, I think this was also mentioned. That's also one of the major reasons we're seeing anxiety and depression so high, is just sheerly off of the chemical exchange that's going on, and the CO2 exchange differences that we're seeing now in generations, especially with mouth breathing.
Yeah.
Like you could absolutely with certainty say that that's a major reason for anxiety in particular. If you think about hyperventilating, etc. Like, and then of course you add that in at night, you're not getting enough, you're not getting into a deep enough sleep, and then you're also converting your cholesterol into cortisol. Like you're down a rabbit hole at that point. And I've even heard like simply changing your mouth breathing really actually can help, like you just mentioned, the metabolic process. You could actually like begin to lose weight fairly quickly, or because it just changes that rate of exchange. It can change your hormones pretty significantly. It can positively impact, some of the other stuff like the thyroid. And also mouth breathing, I'm pretty sure, is one of the leading cause of cavities. So they said that I think it was the biological dentist. I think he's on Instagram, or maybe he was Ask the Dentist. I can't remember. But he was like, "What is the number one cause that you see of cavities?" And he goes, "Mouth breathing. It's not your food necessarily. Like it's actually mouth breathing." And I was like, that makes so much sense, because your viral and bacterial load is completely different if you're mouth breathing versus if you're nasal breathing at night, especially.
And even think about that whole upstream downstream pathway. Your nose, you have filters in your nose to filter out the air. You don't have those same filters in your mouth. So if you're breathing in viruses, you're breathing in bacteria, there's nothing to actually filter that out in your immune system to respond to that. You follow or swallow between 500 and 700 times a day. So if you're swallowing poor oral hygiene, poor oral bacteria, viruses,
you're going
like
to have
that,
those massive overgrowths of, like, you think about SIBO, you think about like imbalanced acids in the stomach, like you think about all that stuff. That's fascinating. That's a whole rabbit trail right there alone.
We'll parking lot that and address it later.
Wow. We just went through, we just kind of like rammed through a lot. So to recap, a couple books you can read is The Oxygen Advantage, if you want to read about mouth breathing. Also, there's another book called Jaws. That's also really about like oral health in that sense. 3 top biohacking devices was the sauna, we got the red light, and cold plunging. And if you can't cold plunge, just hop in the shower, kids. And that was that. We covered a lot. Where can people find you if like they want to learn more?
Yeah, absolutely. So Instagram is the best way, at Josh Kreifels RD. My wife and I run our functional medicine practice through that handle. So shoot me a DM if you have questions. I love answering questions. But other than that, I do offer one-on-one coaching, and we are going to be implementing some awesome courses here in 2023. So we'll have details for that to come. So
that's exciting. I also have been saying your last name very wrong. I've been saying Kreifels.
It's okay. Everybody says it wrong. It's Kreifels. It's German, but
we'll make sure that I'll make sure I spell it correctly, guys.
Appreciate that. But I'll respond either way.
Okay, great. Well, cool. It's been so fun chatting with you. I'm sure we're gonna do this again at some point. And yeah, this has been a blast.
Yeah, this is so fun.
I hope we find ourselves somewhere in one of the cities in the next couple of months to where we all get to like hang out again. Maybe at some point I'll even be able to bring Rodrigo.
I mean, if it's up to me, I would love to have Artisano and have a meal cooked by Rodrigo.
Yeah, where are you? Yeah, I was gonna say, let's get on it, guys.
On us to come to New York, but
I know it's on you guys. It's on your plate now to come to us.
But thank you so much. This was a ton of fun. I really enjoyed it. You're just such a good energy and a good light into functional medicine, so I appreciate it.
We're out here, doing our best. We're out here just trying to learn as much as we can and share that with our friends. So.
I love it.
Cool. Thanks, Josh.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Journal the Body podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to subscribe and then send me any DM questions you have that we can address on a future episode.